When I got back to the dentist with my second drop, one of the kindergartners was already waiting to go back to class. She had this big smiley tooth sticker on her shirt. I brought her back to her classroom and then went for the last kid on my list, a 6th grader like me, Marcus Heilbronner, in class 6506. I'd never heard of him. I knocked on the little window in the classroom door, waving my paper. The teacher, Mr. Anderson, came over, and I showed him my list. "Marcus," he called, and a boy stood up. It was the boy who hit Sal. He'd gotten a very short haircut, but he was definitely the same person. And my brain started yelling at me, "It's the kid who hit Sal. He goes to your school? The kid who hit Sal goes to your school." And meanwhile, the kid had walked over to where I was standing with Mr. Anderson. "Dentist appointment," Mr. Anderson whispered. Marcus nodded, went back to his desk, picked up a book, then walked right past me and out the door. I followed a few steps behind him. He knew the way. "Welcome back, Marcus," the dentist called from the exam room. "Nice haircut." The 4th grader was in the big chair spitting into the little white sink. The other 2 kids were all stickered up and waiting to go back to class. Marcus sat down heavily and opened his book, which was called Concepts in Mathematics. Mr. Tompkin acted like everybody in our class was part of one big happy math group, but it didn't take much to figure out that there was a system. Red math books for genius kids like Jay Stringer, orange ones for kids like me who did okay, and yellow ones for kids who left the room twice a week to meet with Ms. Dudley, who did math support. Marcus's book was different, thick with a hard cover and small type, so I guess that even though it was blue, even farther down the rainbow than yellow, it was at least the equivalent of a red. "You like math?" I said. He looked up and I got the strong feeling he didn't know he had ever seen me before, that he didn't remember punching Sal or talking to me about the sun. "Yeah," he said slowly, like I might be stupid or something. "I like math." And he went back to reading. I delivered the 2 waiting kids back to their classes. One of them was holding a shiny paper card shaped like an apple that she said needed a follow-up visit. There was a line for her mom to sign. Cavity, I thought grimly. When I got back to the dentist office, the 4th grader was still in the chair, and Marcus was still reading his math book. That was fine with me. I grabbed my book from the table where I left it, and I settled back to read. "Some people think it's possible, you know," Marcus mumbled. "What?" He pointed at my book. "Time travel. Some people think it's possible. Except those ladies lied at the beginning of the book." "What?" "Those ladies in the book, Mrs. What, Mrs. Where, Mrs. Who?" "Mrs. What's-it, Mrs. Who, and Mrs. Which," I corrected him. He shrugged. "What do you mean they lied? They never lied." I was getting annoyed. The truth is, I hate to think about other people reading my book. It's like watching someone go through the box of private stuff that I keep under my bed. "Don't you remember?" He leaned forward in his chair. "They're traveling through time, right? All over the universe, right? And they promised that girl that they'll have her back home 5 minutes before she left, but they don't." "How do you know they don't get her home 5 minutes before she left? I mean, there's no clock or anything. They leave at night, they get back the same night. Maybe they left at 8:30 and got home at 8:25. He laughed. "You don't need a clock. Think. At the beginning of that book, that girl walks through the vegetable garden. Meg." "Huh? You keep saying that girl. Her name is Meg." "Oh, well, so she walks to the far side of the vegetable garden and sits on the stone wall, right? So she can see the garden from where she's sitting and talking with that boy, right? And then those ladies show up and they take him away. His name is Calvin, and so what if they can see the garden? So, the garden is where they appear when they get back at the end of the book, remember? They land in the broccoli. So if they had gotten home 5 minutes before they left, like those ladies promised they would, then they would have seen themselves get back before they left. I put my book down and shook my head. Think about it. They hadn't even left yet. How could they have gotten back already? They didn't even know for sure they would get back. Doesn't matter whether they knew it. That's got nothing to do with it. He leaned back and shoved his hands in his pockets. If they land in the broccoli at 8:25, they should be in the broccoli at 8:25. Period. That makes no sense, I said. What if they couldn't do it? Save Meg's father and get back in one piece? Then they wouldn't have landed in the broccoli at all. But they did do it, right? Yeah, but the end can't happen before the middle. He smiled. Why can't it? I don't know. It's common sense. Common sense. Have you read Relativity? You know, by Einstein? I glared at him. Einstein says, common sense is just habit of thought. It's just how we're used to thinking about things, but a lot of the time that just gets in the way. In the way of what? In the way of what's true. I mean, it used to be common sense that the world was flat and the sun revolved around it, but at some point someone had to reject that assumption, or at least question it. Well, obviously somebody did. Yeah, well, duh, Copernicus did. Look, all I'm saying is that at the end of the book, they don't get back 5 minutes before they left, or they would have seen themselves get back before they left. I gave up. It was dark in the garden, I said. Maybe they just couldn't see themselves from where they were sitting. I thought of that, he said, but they would have heard all the yelling and the dog. Oh my God, what does it matter? It's a story. Someone made it up. You do realize that, don't you? He shrugged. The story's made up, but time travel is possible. In theory. I've read some articles about it. Wow, you really do like math, don't you? He smiled again. With his super short hair, his head looked like a perfectly round ball when he smiled. This is more like physics. Fine, you really like physics, don't you? Yeah. He picked up my book from the table and flipped through it. Actually, I had almost the same conversation with my teacher right after I read this. She didn't understand me at first either. She? Mr. Anderson is a he. You really don't notice much about people, do you? Not Mr. Anderson. This was in 2nd grade. I wrote a book report about it. In 2nd grade? He put the book down. Yeah, back in Detroit where we used to live till last year. But I don't talk about this stuff with anyone anymore, usually. Why not? He shot me a look. People don't want to think about it. I can see why. It makes my head hurt. Still, you did better than most people. You're a pretty smart kid. I rolled my eyes. Gee, thanks. Okay, Marcus, the dentist chirped from the other room. You're up. I watched Marcus slip into the big chair and begin to read his big math book again, holding it up with one hand while the dentist worked from the other side. The 4th grader waited for me by the door with his sticker on. Miranda, you can go on back to class, the dentist called. Marcus is going to be here a while. He can walk himself upstairs when we're through. So I picked up my book and hiked up down the stairs with the 4th grader. As we started down the hallway to the classroom, he stopped, and I waited while he peeled his sticker off his shirt, folded it, and stuck it in his pocket.